this is America. For better or for worse, the visions that we share in these darkened theaters shape the myths that define our times. And we're spending more money on movies than ever before. Big money, big stakes. As a result, the conglomerates are moving in. Tonight, we'll be talking with some of the major players to determine how they're adapting to these new rules. We'll try to find out how hard it is to make it now in this glamorous but very tough business. And we'll find out what effect all of this is likely to have on you, the audience.
The New Hollywood with Tom Brokaw.
Here it is, folks, says Gene Shalit, the first flat-out, fall-down comedy of the year.
Thank God.
Whether they're cops or robbers, nurses or nuns, there's no disguising it. This movie is hysterical.
Champagne, man. Or some caviar?
It's riotously funny, with more bite than a fish called Wanda.
I don't know whether I can believe all this.
That's your problem, sister.
Eric Idle, Nuns on the Run, rated PG-13. Now playing in select areas, opens March 30th everywhere.
The garbage bag.
It's a place of dreams, and the dreams can be pretty grand because if you make it big here, there's enough money for whatever you want. These days, more than ever before, Hollywood is a place where business comes first, entertainment second, and art, well, art is a distant third. Money is the scorecard in Hollywood these days. And what better way to show the world that you have made it big in Hollywood, that you have beaten the long odds, than to surround yourself with the icons of success. It is a land of conspicuous consumption. A king would feel comfortable in many of these homes, and it takes a king's ransom to buy them. $2 million for just a medium-sized house. $1 million for a vacant lot. And the most important symbols of success in Hollywood, the cars.
Crazy about an automobile. Shoot, shoot. Every woman I know.
The right car to drive away from the right restaurant. After you've taken a meeting to discuss the next deal.
One more thing I want to tell you. Straight riding in love. Just can't be.
The major players are studio executives, the producers, the agents, the directors, who make the films that gross millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars.
You can come from Alaska, you can come from Russia, you can come from wherever, and if you've got something Hollywood wants in terms of what your talent creates, they accept you. No passport, no visa, no smallpox shot, no credentials. If you can do the work, you can work.
Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer produced blockbusters. Each of their films has grossed more than $100 million. Top Gun went over $170 million. Simpson and Bruckheimer first broke the $100 million barrier with Flashdance. Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2 together made almost $400 million.
You know, this is the cleanest and nicest police car I've ever been in my life. This thing's nicer than my apartment.
We're in the transportation business. We want to put you in a room for 2 hours and take you to a different place in a different emotional space. And when you come out, you go, that was fun.
Simpson and Bruckheimer are using the real world of NASCAR racing as a backdrop for their next film, Days of Thunder, the Top Gun of car racing starring Tom Cruise. It's what they call a high concept idea in Hollywood. You can explain it in one sentence, and it has a major star and producers with a track record for making lots of money. This is a real NASCAR race at Phoenix International Speedway. But the green car that Cruise will drive comes in for more than gas. $100,000 cameras are mounted front and rear. In the same amount of time it takes the other racers to gas up, the Hollywood team changes cameras.
If you put this thing on a wall at 200 miles an hour, I'm sure the camera would be destroyed.
The trick is to see how long we can keep these cars in the race before somebody puts us in the wall. That's real fun.
Bruckheimer and Simpson work for Paramount, and they're spending $400,000 of Paramount's money just to test the system. But in the new Hollywood, $400,000 is loose change. Paramount has agreed to pay up to $300 million for the next 5 Simpson-Bruckheimer films.
Paramount handles the business end for us. They allow us the luxury to just create and make these movies as best we know how.
Paramount is one of the 6 major studios that goes all the way back to the time of silent movies, when this industry was run by Mayer and Goldwyn and the Warner Brothers, tough, ruthless immigrants who ruled with an iron fist until their hold was broken by antitrust laws and by television. But now, the major studios are back with a vengeance. They produce the films, they distribute them, and they show them in their own theaters. To a very large extent, they determine what films are made, what films we see.
Well, you got to watch out for this door. It's a very, very heavy door. Otto Preminger put it in.
Art Linson produces movies for Paramount from Otto Preminger's old office on the studio lot. Art produced a blockbuster for Paramount, The Untouchables.
If you walk through this door now, you're walking into a world of trouble. And there's no turning back, you understand?
Yes, I do.
The Untouchables received great critical acclaim, but what Paramount liked best was the bottom line. $200 million in business worldwide.
This is a raid!
You get rewarded not for being original or good. You get rewarded for doing big business. And it's hard for me and for a lot of people to develop material. I mean, it's like if I knew what that simple blockbuster was, we'd all develop it. But all you can do is do the kinds of things that interest you and then hope everybody likes them.
But the studio really wants a big film all the time.
No matter what they say, I have to admit that's what they're looking for. And you do hear people saying, listen, what we wanted something here of importance and this and that. But in the end, I had an experience with a film like Casualties of War that was a wonderful movie that got massive critical acclaim and didn't do big business at the box office. And there is a slight but subtle stigma attached to the fact that, you know, it didn't do it.
I ain't doing it. No way. Oh, what's the matter? Don't you like girls? Say your problem.
The problem with the major studios is that they're not even interested in making just a lot of money. They want to make a lot and a lot of money, and that's the problem. They want to make 60, 70, $80 million in profit on one project. And so they're always shooting for that, you know, the big ring.
The blockbuster.
The blockbuster.
The demand for the blockbuster comes from studios now owned by conglomerates, a trend that began at Paramount in 1967 when it was bought by Gulf and Western. 20th Century Fox was bought in 1985 by Rupert Murdoch's Australian communications conglomerate. Warner Brothers merged last year with Time Inc. to form another huge conglomerate. And Universal is owned by MCA, with diverse interest in real estate and music, as well as movies.
More and more and more, for example, film companies now are owned by large conglomerates who are looking for quarterly profit reports the same way they would with a car company or a soft drink company or whatever.
Look right here, Brokaw.
Sidney Pollack directs the big pictures with the big stars. Out of Africa, The Way We Were, Tootsie. Now he's directing Havana, a $40 million epic on location in Santo Domingo. Robert Redford is the star. Havana will have to gross well over $100 million just to break even.
Now every time I go out there, it's like the national debt is up for grabs because the cost is so high. A couple things have happened. The picture came along and did $100 million and upwards, and then everybody was looking for the $100 million picture. And what's happened in a way is the sort of middle ground of movies where I think some of the best movies were made, that's been phased out. I think what's happening is that we're making fewer and fewer and fewer films, and each film has more pressure on it to perform, and to perform in the stratosphere.
The Sony Corporation raised the stakes beyond the stratosphere. Sony bought Columbia for almost $3.5 billion and then paid more than $700 million for Peter Guber and John Peters, the producers of Batman, to run Columbia. Everywhere, the price went up.
It's completely changed the equation. It's as if someone, as a baseball player, made $2 million his entire life, and in 1 year woke up and made $150 million.
Joe Roth is the new chairman of 20th Century Fox.
So screenplays that a week before would sell for $250,000 sell for $1,250,000. And directors who got paid $500,000 are now getting, can get paid $3 million. It's great to be an agent. Let me put it that way. It'd be great to be an agent today representing talent, whether it be actor talent, producer talent, writer or director talent, because it's raised the stakes into a bidding situation on almost everything.
Hi.
Terrific, thanks. I got a script for you guys for this weekend. It's going out to other people simultaneously, so my suggestion is you read it now and call me over the weekend, okay?
Agent David Greenblatt is sending out a script for a weekend bidding war, a Friday ritual at major agencies in Hollywood. Intertalent is a boutique agency, small, exclusive, and successful.
Intertalent.
I know it'll be terrific, but the offer has to be there.
Bill Block takes the bids for his clients. If he has a hot script, he could sell it by breakfast on Saturday.
Perfect. All right. Have a great weekend, Tom. Thanks. Bye-bye.
I appreciate that, and believe me, I will
Judy
never...
Hoffman started in another agency's mailroom. Now she's a partner at Intertalent.
Your screenplays alone have sold for $1 million, and frequently recently. All of the major studios want to have these big, blockbuster, star-driven movies, and when there's a screenplay in the marketplace that could be that, the competition for it is very great, and prices skyrocket.
It's subject to positive cash flow?
Mark Rosen wears a headset to protect his ears.
Shape.
Before the headsets, Bill Block developed an ear tumor from holding the receiver all day.
Well, that would be good for us. Yep. It's about getting out there. It's the outgoing phone calls to create jobs, create action for people. That's everything.
Hi, here's Bill.
Hi. Good. How are you doing? Good. Yes.
He wants to do it. I want him to do it.
J.J. Harris negotiates deals for actors.
Are you kidding me? I find it hard to believe, but I'm willing to be favored nations with Randy Quaid. That's what I'm willing to do.
Bill Block's
No,
office.
absolutely not. He will not read the script until we get this in place. He
hang on.
can't. Is this pay or play?
I don't think he deserves to get any less than Randy, and he's only working for probably 2 weeks, so whatever it's going to be, you guys can afford it.
Patty's the one that handled the Goober Peters account? Okay.
We have to do it. We have to make everybody happy. So, dressing room. What's Randy getting?
These characters are some of the most unusual I've ever come across. And it's funny, and it's bizarre.
Getting sand?
There's very little undiscovered talent. That's a bit of a myth. If you're good, we are all out there hunting, and it's very competitive in the agency business. Somebody's going to find you.
Hollywood is a destination for dreamers. Back home, they were told, why, you're just as pretty as a movie star. So they come, wishing for their own star on Hollywood Boulevard. The odds are long. They add only one star every month.
Well, did you hear the good news? There's gonna be some bad blues. Let's go downtown and see what's going on. We're going down in Hollywood. You better hope that you don't run out of gas. Down in Hollywood.
At every premiere, the winners fuel the dreams of the wannabes.
Now, if you want to stay healthy, just keep on moving right on through. Be careful. Well, the scotch just started flowing, and some girls...
Part of the dream is that you'll be discovered, picked up, and made a star. And while you wait, often you do just that. Wait on people in restaurants and bars. Julie Cummins has been trying for 3 years to break into Hollywood as an actress. She auditions for parts and hopes to get an agent while she works at the China Club to survive.
There is a myth about being discovered. People that are discovered have been working at it for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. It's a matter of really perseverance and being relentless. I believe, a brutal pursuit of what you want in order to get it.
It took 8 long years working in television for Sally Field to break in as a film actress. She now has 2 Oscars and a starring role in Steel Magnolias. Still, it is a struggle for Sally in a business dominated by men and their stories of action and adventure. To ensure her continued success, she has her own company, Fogwood Films.
I don't fit into a high-concept idea, and most of the studios buy high-concept ideas or developed high-concept ideas. So therefore, where do I fit in unless I do it myself? I wouldn't be working.
Does that concern you, though, about the future? Because more and more of the power in this town is being held by fewer and fewer hands.
Yes, it does. It does. And I think it concerns everybody that there's becoming less and less studios. They are merging like the rest of this country. unfortunately. And I think it's hurting this industry. I think it's hurting the country.
10 years from now, do you think that there will be opportunities for young, unknown directors, screenwriters, unknown talent to come in here and get a film made?
Yes. I think that there will always be a place for talent. If you have knocked on every door and you have not gotten to where you want to be, it's because you're not good enough. Because talent will always find a way in. It won't always like it once it gets in, and it won't always be fair, because the talent is not fair. But it is very much in awe of talent.
We're going!
Film producer Brian Grazer started as a $5 an hour law clerk at Warner Brothers. Now he's living the dream in Malibu with his wife Corky and their 2 children. In the beginning, Brian didn't have money or famous friends, but he did have imagination.
Well, I was a guy that was living in Los Angeles, and there was a lot of very attractive girls in Los Angeles. I thought, is it possible to actually meet a girl that's, you know, sincere and pure and pretty all at the same time? And so I thought that it wasn't possible. So I said, well, if it's not possible, what kind of a person would embody those characteristics? And then it just, as I was driving on the freeway, or actually I was driving on Pacific Coast Highway, I thought, a mermaid would have all those characteristics. And you always think of mermaids as being really pretty and kind of a mythic in a sense. And so I thought, well, what if I were to meet a mermaid? What would happen then? And so that's kind of how it happened.
Hey, come back!
It was ideas that got me into the business. And then, of course, I got Ron Howard who became involved, and Lowell Gantz and Bob Lou Mandel who wrote it. And it became a really good movie because of them.
Splash was very difficult to get made. People thought, you know, well, it's 3 different movies, 3 different styles, a mermaid, who knows, who's in it, there's no stars. And, you know, we finally convinced some people to finance it, but everybody turned it down.
Mm-hmm. Ron Howard and Brian Grazer no longer struggle to get their films made. They now have their own public company, Imagine Entertainment. Their first Imagine film grossed over $95 million.
What's the matter, honey? You don't feel so good? You feel like you want to throw up?
Okay. Gil, oh my God, oh Taylor, baby, oh sweetie, oh. Gil, why are you just standing there? Oh, sweetie.
Waiting for her head to spin around.
You'll be all right then. Action.
Parenthood was the first of a 20-picture deal Imagine has with Universal. Ron can't direct them all, so Brian and Ron must hire other directors and writers.
Yeah. Like this guy would do a really good job, but it'd be kind of weird and dark, right?
Right, right. And you're looking for the charge.
I'm looking for the scary charge,
Mhm.
the thriller.
He'd totally get that.
This guy would get it right.
Completely.
Successful directors and writers are always in great demand.
Jeff, I heard it. I got to decide tomorrow whether I'm going to pay that much for $300,000, right?
Brian must match a competing offer, or a writer will go elsewhere.
Maybe I better call him and schmooze him. Hey, how you doing? You've got to do our movie. You like it now, don't you? You're into it. Got to make a living. Well, you make a fine living. You live well. You live too well.
However, few writers live well. Most struggle to find any recognition.
Hi, is Lynn available?
James Middleton wants to be a screenwriter.
Yeah, this is James Middleton. And I sent her a screenplay. And I wanted to see if she had gotten a chance to take a look at it yet.
A script he wrote at USC Film School was good enough to attract an agent.
It's Erica 213.
But with his credit cards running out, what Jay really needs now is a deal. He has an idea to pitch on the Burbank lot.
Hi, I should have a pass for James Middleton.
The pitch is an art form of its own. Writers pitch ideas to studio executives, hoping to write the actual screenplay.
Sometimes people like an idea, and you can tell, right from, the first sentence. And other times it's hell. You're sitting there trying to pitch this idea for 5 minutes, and you just see a dead face in front of you, and you walk out kind of like, what happened? Something went wrong.
The business operates by people interaction. And usually the people that ultimately make the decisions have a very, very short period of time that you have contact with them. and they create impressions almost instantaneously. So if you create the wrong impression with somebody, it might take years for you to ever have a legitimate contact with that person again. So you have to be very, very precise about what you do. It's a very deliberate effort.
And you have to pitch all over Hollywood to more than one player, time after time, to have a chance for a deal.
Good. You got some pitches for me. This story is based on something that happened to me about 4 years ago. It was the first time that I really fell in love. Now, this is one I call Love Spy. It's the first time you fall in love. This happened about 4 years ago.
But you basically have to be able to tell a story in a way that is captivating, captivates the listener.
It didn't work out, and I lost her, and I didn't have an address or anything. And I saw a class for private detective school.
So you took a class?
So, well, no, I went to the class. There was a guy, you know, he's kind of a hack.
Then I found that if you can tell that idea in a very short period of time, and then somehow involve the person that you're talking to, that was probably the best way to sell a movie.
This is where the story takes off, and into the third act. What he realizes is that to save her, he's got to save his rival. She will see that Wayne is corrupt, and maybe that this guy that she rejected really does love her, and hopefully at the end they're going to get together.
Okay, well, yeah, I have a feeling that one's not going to fly here.
Okay, all right.
You don't have to be particularly talented or skilled to get a movie made. That only takes energy and focus. In order to get a movie made that's good, to have the movie be good, that takes the additional quality of talent. Because if it was about talent that took a movie in order to get a movie made, then every movie would be great. But it isn't about that. It's about a different thing. It's about energy and perseverance and really being impervious to rejection.
The low point is that people don't like your work. They tell you they don't like your work, and you don't have any money. That's what the low points are. That's really low.
Film continues.
Oh, then you got it.
Cut! Cut! Quiet, please!
All right, let's shoot this one.
On a film set, the director is king. More and more these days, the directors are the real stars of Hollywood. Almost all of the top directors who've come into the business in recent years wrote their way in with a script, an outline of their unique vision that persuaded someone to bankroll their dreams. These writer-directors started off making small-budget independent films, and their successes led to the opportunity to make the big-budget films for the major studios. Now, the trick is for them to maintain their vision, because the pressure is on to always produce a blockbuster. They walk a thin line between their art and money. These are the winners.
See that ridge line?
Oliver Stone has been nominated for an Academy Award this year as Best Director for Born on the 4th of July. Stone spent a month shooting in the Philippines, but before production began, he had already spent years writing and rewriting the script with Ron Kovic, the Vietnam veteran whose life was the basis for the film. Their script has been nominated for an Oscar, and Tom Cruise is also a candidate for Best Actor. Long before Stone got the chance to direct films like Platoon, Salvador, and Wall Street, he learned the craft of screenwriting.
Wrote a lot of scripts. I wrote about 10 scripts. Couldn't get them read hardly. Couldn't get an agent. Finally got lucky with Robert Bolt helped me, the English screenwriter who wrote Lawrence of Arabia. Read one of my scripts and worked with me and got me an agent. And that was in 1976, after about 5 years of lack of success.
Is it still possible for people to do the Oliver Stone route to success?
Sure. Oh, yeah. This is, it's an open playing field, you know. Anybody can come. It's free. It's a democracy. You can be any color, any race, any religion, you can think anything you want as long as it works on paper. I like that.
You know that it would be untrue.
The Doors will be Oliver's next movie.
You know that I would be a liar.
He's casting the actors. His story of the rock and roll band and its tragic leader, Jim Morrison, will examine the darker side of the 60s, the time when Oliver came home from Vietnam to go to film school in New York.
I always think back to NYU Film School because it is where you learn to make a film cheap because you wanted to make it more than anything else in the world.
Are those values still intact, given the changing Hollywood?
It's tough, you know. I mean, that's where the crunch comes every day. You face a crisis, and then you have to be yourself, or else you start to lose it. You start to compromise yourself. I mean, I think it's important. In my case, I do most of my own writing, or else I work with another writer. But I have to spend a certain amount of time per year alone, with my with my butt in the chair. And writing keeps you honest.
What do you think one of your characters from Wall Street would think about what's going on in Hollywood?
Oh, I think there's probably laugh and say there's money to be made here. And I think the only approach you can take to Hollywood that's sane is to be a good pirate and say, ha, 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 I'm going to fly the Jolly Roger, and I'm going to try to keep my freedom and not get, sort of like if you see the pirate ships flying around the Caribbean, you want to stay away from the British and the French flags and the Spanish flags because they got the big ships, and you want to keep your freedom. And maybe one day, if you're lucky, you'll end up as governor of Jamaica,
Going again, stand by.
Oliver Stone is not the only one to keep his freedom in the movie business. Spike Lee.
Let's get Robin, get on the stage, please. Frank, let's a live mic for Robin.
The first film he wrote and directed, She's Gotta Have It, cost $175,000 and yet grossed $7.5 million, a profit margin the major studios respect.
Please, baby, please, baby, please, baby, 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 please.
Doctor,
Come on, what?
always do the right thing.
Do the Right Thing was distributed by Universal, and Universal is also bankrolling Spike's latest film, The Mo' Better Blues, a story about jazz and love. Spike wrote the script, directs, and also plays a character caught between two women to whom he gave the same dress.
You know how it is when you're doing nothing. You never know when you're through.
The fact that the films I have made money, this is just giving me more clout. We had to fight for every penny to do the right thing. The budget was $6.5 million. The budget on this film is $10 million, but we had to fight for that. But because of the success of Do the Right Thing, that I was able to get this film, and I don't think I could do a film with more controversial subject matter and Do the Right Thing.
Do you think that there's enough room in this business for the likes of Spike Lee, or are you unique?
Well, I think that I have a unique situation because there are a lot more successful directors who've done a lot more films than I have that made greater sums of money, but they don't have a final cut. What I'm doing now, I visualized when I was in college. I knew that I would be a filmmaker. I knew I'd be a good filmmaker, too. So whatever I had to do to get to that point, short of killing somebody, we did.
Writer-director Barry Levinson has returned to his hometown of Baltimore to complete the trilogy he started with his films Diner and Tin Men.
Okay.
Barry wrote the film he calls Avalon about his family's journey over 50 years in America. The film begins on the 4th of July, 1914, when his grandfather first arrived in Baltimore from Europe.
It is a problem with the wall.
Barry Levinson is proof that in the movie business, you can go from the bottom to the top.
Cut it.
Barry won an Oscar last year for directing Rain Man, and yet back in Baltimore, he finished last in his high school class.
I was 460 out of 460. They were downstairs rehearsing Pomp and Circumstance, and I was taking a makeup test that I missed in the 10th grade.
Barry actually did go on to college at American University, got a job at a TV station, and eventually began to write movies.
Well, I think you have to write about what you know at some time in your life. I mean, you're gonna borrow from your childhood or your adulthood or recollections of stories.
Diner was Levinson's first film about the world he knew in Baltimore with his friends in the 50s. And the second was Tin Men, the story of two aluminum siding salesmen.
I think you have to run with the work that you believe in and live and die by that. If you start to try to pander to the marketplace, I think the worst thing that can happen is, at best, it does all right, and if it fails, then you're really left with nothing, because then you've made a movie that you don't even believe in.
Babylon is not a high-concept film. There are no gimmicks except the fireworks, and no stars except Barry Levinson.
Very good. Good for you guys?
Last night never happened, and I'm going to marry him, and you and I are going to take this to our coffins.
These days, it takes only one successful film to turn a writer into a director. Moonstruck was that kind of film.
Snap out of it!
The man who wrote Moonstruck, John Patrick Shanley, won an Academy Award for Best Screenplay. Now Shanley is directing a $29 million movie he wrote called Joe versus the Volcano.
Are you Joe Banks?
Yeah.
We just need to tighten up, you know, are you Joe? Are you Joe Banks? I just want to tighten that up a bit.
Yeah, the repartee back and forth.
Do you sometimes stop and think, my God, I'm a living realization of the American dream. Here I am.
Oh, sure. I'm from a blue-collar neighborhood in the Bronx. And my father wanted me to join the sanitation department so that I could start working on my pension when I was 18 years old. And if not that, then become a telephone repairman. And both honorable professions, and one that some of my friends have. But I was incapable of doing jobs like that. I was not capable of sticking to anything like that at the time because it wasn't my temperament. And yeah, it is a kind of only in America thing, and I like that. And my friends that I grew up with like it too. They like that I'm doing what I'm doing.
Could you have made Joe without the backing of a major studio?
No. I shot on the 2 biggest sound stages in the United States. I had a major film star. I had other big-name actors, all of whom expect to be paid. I had a lot of sets and a 60-foot-long handmade boat on a hydraulic gimbal and an indoor tank, you know, many hundreds of thousands of gallons of water and a storm machine. It's a huge film.
Do you worry about the consolidation of the major studios, ever fewer of them owned by ever larger corporations?
Yes, but I don't know what to make of it. You can certainly see how there's not as much sunlight in the forest for the little trees, for the independent filmmakers, for the little companies. You can see how they're being strangled and they're going out of business, a lot of them. And that means fewer films of a certain kind, of films that are not meant for a broad-based audience. And that, I think, is unfortunate.
Well, there's a certain comfort zone, isn't there, in working for a major studio?
Yes. It's great to have a giant on your side. And it's terrible to have a giant against you. So one must always be cautious of the giant, but be happy when the giant is friendly.
Fewer than 450 films were produced and distributed in American theaters. The year before that, there were more than 500 films. Now, the major studios didn't suffer. They produced and released almost exactly the same number of films they did the previous year, and they made even more money. The difference is there were fewer small films. Those films produced by independent filmmakers, the kinds of films that give an outsider a chance to crack the business. The films that give the audiences a breather from the steady diet of sequels and big action movies. This growing monopoly in the marketplace of ideas is a concern even to those who benefit from it.
Action!
Robert Redford is starring in Universal's $40 million production of Havana. He'll take home a big chunk of that $40 million, but Redford, unlike many stars, just doesn't take the money and run.
I think people need to have options in terms of what to see and what to make. Sometimes the bigger films, like this one, if they're successful, they allow you the opportunity to do something that's a little more risky. So that's what I've been able to do.
Why are independent films important in your judgment to your business?
I think the virtue of what's called independent film is that it keeps alive the development of new talent. It creates a wider berth for new talent to develop. It keeps alive the idea of diversity, which means we have the opportunity to see more individual stories with personal visions attached to them, more regional filmmaking that tells stories having to do with how people live.
You back independent films through the Sundance Institute and through your own company. You help get them financed. You've got a couple of pictures now at, what, $5 million a piece or so? Something like that. Don't you have a concern that they'll just get lost in this kind of hurricane effect that is building in Southern California?
It's possible there's a danger to that, yeah, because of the centralization the industry's into at the time. Films are very costly to make because they're costly to release. So that's dangerous. It's very hard to make a low-budget film these days, but on the other hand, the examples are all over the place of the fact that you still can, and it can still be effective. The independent filmmaker's greatest problem is in distribution and exhibition. Are people going to get to see the film?
One independent company, Castle Rock Entertainment, solved the problem by making a deal with a major studio, Columbia, for distribution. Their first film, When Harry Met Sally, grossed $93 million for Castle Rock and Columbia. Director Rob Reiner is one of the founders of Castle Rock. Reiner started directing independent films. This is Spinal Tap, The Princess Bride, and Stand By Me led to the creation of Castle Rock. Stand By Me also gave the company its name.
I was living in a small town in Oregon called Castle Rock. There were only 1,281 people, but to me, it was the whole world.
We have the best of both worlds. We're an independent company that is distributed through a major, so we are fairly autonomous, but we still are subject to the same marketing costs that the majors are. It still costs anywhere from $9 to $12 million to release any film, whether it's a small picture or a big picture. Ultimately, it's going to cost you upwards of $15 million over the course of the run of a picture, and that means that you do have to make pictures that are more accessible. There's no getting around it. You know, the idea of making a small little art film is getting much more difficult, you know, because of the marketing costs.
Would it be more difficult now to make The Princess Bride and Stand By Me and the films that you began making and that were so critically acclaimed? Could they do as well, not in the theater, but in the industry here in terms of getting made and getting out?
It's tricky to say. I mean, this past year, Do the Right Thing did fairly well, and Sex, Lies, and Videotape did fairly well, and they're both pictures that are out of the mainstream. So I think there is still room for that, but it's awfully tricky. I mean, you have to find just the right, just the right film that fits in, that crosses the mainstream and also can be somewhat artistic. It's very, very hard.
It can be done. Sex, Lies, and Videotape and My Left Foot are two independent films that broke through last year. They're distributed by Miramax Films of New York, one of the few independent distributors left. Miramax sells by emphasizing good reviews and by picking their markets carefully. The moguls of Miramax are Bob and Harvey Weinstein.
To get a film either financed here or acquired at Miramax, it's really a case of me and my brother being the final decision-making. We've picked up so many films and, financed so many pictures based on his approval, my approval, and that was it. There was no 3 weeks, hold on, we've got to go up through the corporate board meeting. That's what we like.
At Miramax, we're not under that corporate pressure to say, Jesus, we've got to go up each year. I mean, otherwise the board of directors is going to come in and shoot us or maybe force us to harikari ourselves, depending on the present atmosphere out there. So we can do what we think is good, and if our profits are lower next year than they were the year before, so what? So what, as long as we did good work.
After last year's success, including 5 Academy Award nominations for My Left Foot, Miramax is moving downtown to the new Tribeca Film Center, a former coffee factory with a new owner, Robert De Niro. De Niro is renovating this building to recapture the creative energy and camaraderie of his early days in New York with filmmakers like Martin Scorsese and Brian De Palma. The Tribeca Center will be a place for filmmakers to come together once again, where ideas might flow from the gathering of creative minds.
When I saw this building, I said it'd be nice to have a place that would have everything like a restaurant, a screening room, especially this one, which is a state-of-the-art screening room. Don't ask me all the details, but I know it is, where a lot of people would be brought together in film, creative people who, just by being together, ideas would come up and projects and so on that we don't even know what they would be. I mean, the whole thing will take on a life of its own.
The rules are changing in your business. I mean, there's a real consolidation of power going on. everybody expecting a bigger return, more zeros at the end of every...
That's true, yeah. You know, movies is a certain sort of blockbuster attitude now, and we're getting away from small films that have something to say. What I always think of is that I'd like to create a place for myself, like a company, which is part of the film center, just to support whatever I want to do, which would not necessarily be a movie. That would have to be a big budgeted film that has to make a certain amount of money in order to break even.
De Niro is not alone. Aliens, starring Sigourney Weaver, was a high-concept sequel that did far more than break even. But the producer of Aliens, Gail Ann Hurd, wants to expand her art.
There's nothing more gratifying to me than watching aliens with an audience and having them scream back at the screen, cheer, jump, and leave the theater exhausted. That's wonderful. But you also want to grow as a filmmaker. Now that I've said what I want to say in terms of commercial entertainment, I'd like to be able to have the opportunity to make a film that's more personal. And now we're seeing the tide turn, and those personal films are made only if they have a hot package in terms of, you know, a proven director and a stable of stars.
Still, Gail Ann Hurd continues working with the major studios. She is executive producer of this 20th Century Fox movie called Downtown. Once a film is finished, you still have to get it into the theaters.
Every film has to be funneled through a distribution company. It doesn't matter if you're independent and you get the film financed. In order to get it distributed, you now have to go to maybe 5 or 6 companies. And ultimately, that's where the power lies.
Is that fair?
Unfortunately, I think it's a reality because of the cost of opening a film, because of how much it costs to advertise a picture, because the consent decrees are no longer valid. You know, there can be more of a monopoly of the production, the financing, and distribution, exhibition of films.
The consent decrees date back to the 30s and 40s, when the major studios not only produced and distributed films, but also owned the theaters. In 1948, the Supreme Court found that theater ownership made the majors vertical monopolies and issued the Paramount Consent Decrees, which ordered the studios to sell their theaters. Yet today, major studios own theaters despite that court ruling. The lucrative Westwood area of Los Angeles is a prime example. The Mann chain owns over half the screens in Westwood, and Paramount and Warner Brothers own Mann.
The theory of the antitrust laws, which I think has proved to be the case over many years, is that ultimately the public benefits from competition.
Peter Fishbein is an attorney who litigates antitrust cases before the Supreme Court.
And as a result of that, these decrees were issued, which essentially broke up the vertical integration of the major film companies and had a series of continuing restraints which prevented them from going back into a vertically integrated mode.
But 40 years later, it seems to me that we're back in a vertically integrated mode. The control over distribution and exhibition is in the hands of a handful of studios now, correct?
That is correct, and that is a direct result, I think, of the Reagan administration's antitrust policies, which have been not to be very concerned about vertical integration and to focus instead almost exclusively on horizontal arrangements among competing entities.
The consent decree that was passed in 1948 is still on the books, but there's no action.
Bruce Corwin is an independent theater owner. His Metropolitan chain competes with the studio-owned theaters in Southern California.
It's very, very difficult for private, family, independent companies to survive and grow.
But is it as bad as it was in the bad old days when studios really did control large strings of theaters across the country and control it from beginning to end?
It could be just as bad because, for example, Paramount and Warner's own Mann Theater circuit out here in California. Sony, Columbia own Lowe's theaters on the East Coast. Do they play their picture in one of their own theaters, or do they play their picture in a competing theater?
Universal Pictures is another major studio with its own theaters. Universal's parent corporation, MCA, owns half of Cineplex Odeon, the second largest theater chain in the country with almost 2,000 screens. Tom Pollock is chairman of MCA's Motion Picture Group.
Ultimately, aren't you right on the verge of antitrust?
Oh, no, I don't think so. It's not
It's not what you own, it's how you do it. The theater business today is a multiplex business. Their average theater has 4 or 5 screens, 4 or 5 movies opening. If one doesn't work, the other one will, and the theaters book all the movies. Theater business become a much different business than it was in 1948 when the antitrust laws were first applied to theater ownership.
So none of this really concerns you about what's going on with the consolidation of power and ownership and the narrower and narrower base for making films?
Per se, no. Abuse of power, of course, and that's something you always have to worry about. The idea of being big, that big is bad, is not, I don't subscribe to. Anybody who has power can abuse it if they wish. If they don't, then they haven't done anything wrong.
They may be careful to make sure that they don't put up a red flag to the Justice Department. But, you know, after it goes on for a while, where are you going to play your picture? You got your own picture. You have your own money in your picture. You want to put it in your own theater. We're concerned about that. We're concerned about that because it may happen. Hasn't happened, but may happen.
If the trend continues, you would have a situation 5 years from now which would be closer to what we had in the 40s when Paramount decrees came into effect, where you'd have a limited number of companies that would control the bulk of the production of movies, the distribution of movies, and the showing of movies. In the long run, I think the public will suffer. It will suffer both from higher prices at the box office and from less choice in the places it can go to see its movies.
So the squeeze is really on an independent theater owner like you?
The squeeze is really on from every direction.
Movies and big business. They've always been two of the most prominent symbols of America, and they've always been able to live together compatibly. But now there's a danger that one will completely dominate the other, that the bottom line will suffocate the storyline, that accountants, not artists, will have the final cut. Of course, a lot of people will get rich in the process. Studio executives and those stars, producers, and directors who can move people through the box offices at ever higher prices. But what about you? What about the audiences who buy the tickets? Well, if you don't like what you see, you can always go elsewhere, right? Not necessarily. If these big companies have complete control, there will be fewer opportunities for the unique vision, for the smaller film. In fact, someday, those movie marquees can not only hold the title of the picture, but a subtitle. Take it or leave it. I'm Tom Brokaw. Good night from all of us at NBC News.
Well, did you hear the good news? There's gonna be some bad blues. Somebody said they'd play it all night long. So go and fill your brown bag and put on all your clean rags. Let's go downtown and see what's going on. You take me down to Vine Street and stop when you hear the backbeat, and I'll sneak past the bouncer at the door. Now I know that he ain't looking, not when the band is cooking, 'cause he's watching the ladies dancing on the floor. We're going down in Hollywood. You better hope that you don't run out of gas. Down in Hollywood.
Tonight, Johnny's back with an all-new show, and David Steinberg's Pointed Observations, plus the music of Don McLean. Then when you hear,
Please, no wagering.
you know Dave's got stupid pet tricks, plus Tracy Ullman.
Ladies and gentlemen, you'll laugh so hard your pancreas will explode.